Good. Okay, welcome everyone. We are starting the session of knowledge exchange by Professor Nizam Salhat from the Istiklal University from Jericho, Palestine. And this is part of the Academic Alliance for Reconciliation, Conflict Transformation, and Peace Building in the Middle East and North Africa, or MENA project, and Erasmus Plus project, capacity building for higher education institutions in the MENA region. Welcome, Professor Nizam, and we welcome you to our session. And you have the floor. You can start.
Thank you, Professor Iyad, and good evening for everybody. For today, my presentation will be about security and reconciliation. And this is a topic that is always in discussion, especially with the latest developments on the international arena. And people always ask what relationship between security and reconciliation, and what mechanism can security work on behalf of reconciliation. So to dig inside for the line, we can again return back to the concept of both reconciliation and security, so as to find mutual values between both. We recall that reconciliation is about forgiveness, peace, justice, equality, conflict transformation. Also, reconciliation aims to achieve international stability and community peace, as well as social coherence and rule of law at the domain of the community and the state. Reconciliation has to do with development and prosperity and poverty reduction, while security is about order, peace, stability, and justice. Same as reconciliation, peace, security has to do with achieving justice. As well, security is a state of feeling secure. One of the main definitions of security is that security is a state of feeling secure. So this is a psychological approach to security, and it meets with reconciliation in objectives. Security is a mean to maintain rule of law and order at the domain of the society. And as well, security is about development. As we know, or McNamara has said it, no development without security and no security without development. So upon these conceptions between security and reconciliation, I think we can find a platform to understand how security is related to reconciliation, or how can security arrangements and reconciliation work together in harmony. Let's again set the aspects of security. Security can be seen from different aspects, from economic, social, strategic, but in general, we can differentiate between three main aspects of security: national security, international security, and human security. These three aspects or levels of security are understood from different approaches. First of all, national security. As we know, national security is the main dominant conception of security. And this is from long ago, during even the Cold War and after the Cold War. This has to do with a state as a major unit in international relations. And we know that world international relation is understood as a relation between states, no any other human organization. And from this, national security is a key because it reflects the concern of the state against external threats. And this is one of the main objectives of national security. As well, national security has to do with the sovereignty, which is an intrinsic part of the state as a main actor in international policy. The second domain or level of security is highly connected with national security, and this is the international security because it has to do with relations between international actors that does not promote wars, or in a way that must not promote wars. For international security is based on national security, and it is based on the national interest of the state. So very highly, it has been regarded as an important factor to understand international security. I mean, national security. The third approach and aspect of security is human security. And in this domain, security is seen as security for people, regardless of race, gender, nationality, or ethnicity, religion. So humanity is the main concern of international order as well as the state. From this aspect, we can find a kind of contradictory between human security and national security. Because security in national security has to do with a security of specific people, of a specific group, regardless of the security of the others. And in different occasions, national security for a given people, for a given nation, can stand against national security of another nations, or against security of other human groups. And we have noticed these reflections of national security in different international crises, even during coronavirus pandemic. We saw that how competing over vaccines and over other materials has to do with the pandemic between the states. So national security reflects an ego, reflects a state central, reflects national interest, while human security is an inclusive concept of security because it has to do with security of the human beings, regardless of their loyalties, regardless of their belongings. While national security is represented by the state, human security is represented by international organizations, by non-state factors. Sorry, like UNDP, for example, can be an example of providing human security, or Health World Organization as well. While national security is represented by the state and manifested by the state and its actor as well. Let's go to the first aspect and see how international security is connected to reconciliation. International security aims at maintaining international order and stability. I mean, when we study international relations, we understand that in each period of history, that international order, it tries to maintain international stability and to decline wars and escalations. So if this is the general intention of international security, the question was how to achieve such objective. The first and well-known objective of achieving international stability was through military means, was through war itself. And if we go back to the Cold War era, we understand that the power balance was the main tool to achieve stabilization. Because with the balance of power, states, countries go to armed conflict and go to armed competing. And the culmination of such armed competing is mass destruction weapons. And the use of mass destruction weapons or the threat of using these weapons make international balance of power and reduce wars from total wars to limited wars. And these wars can be managed by the strong powers or international powers. And we here refer to USA and Soviet Union in the time. So this is the first and well-known approach of achieving international stability is deterrence and power balance between big powers. The second approach is the implementation of international law. And we know that international law is put and represented by international organizations, especially the UN, in order to achieve international peace by implementing international law. But the main problem of international law, as represented by utopian international relation approaches, is not working or has not been working all the time and become a subject to international politics itself, meaning that the superpowers can affect international law and affect the implementation of international law according to the state interests and according to relationships between different powers and different states along the two main poles, and even that was after the end of the Cold War. The third, and here I differentiated between international law and other reconciliation approaches, because so far international law is understood as part of reconciliation approach, but it is not all the time regarded as part of reconciliation or as a reconciliation tool to achieve stability. So here we are talking about specific means to bring peace and stability, like applying human security against national security by promoting dialogue and negotiations, by the spread of democratization, the spread of democracy and democratization as a process, through economic cooperation and depending on conflict transformation. However, also this approach has been a subject to politics as well as international law, because as we know that the use of democracy was part of the containment policy after Cold War, and this is used by Western powers headed by the USA in a sole pole security system that has dominated the world after the end of the Cold War. So in order to achieve the objects of the new international order that has been formulated after the Cold War, such specific means was used, but it has been regarded as part of the international politics rather than being an approaches to achieve these values in international relations. Now, promoting the human security in the international sphere has been partially applied by, as we have said, by the UN organizations and other non-state actors that has to do or has not to do with politics or in different times. And this has to do with development approaches, with helping democratization, transparency, good governance, and so on. The role of international organizations in promoting human security as a value and as a political tool for stability and peace. Also by emphasizing human security at both national and international politics. And here we are talking about seeing or overseeing some policies that has been practiced by some states like autocracy or authoritarian states against their people. And here we are talking about the human rights organizations and or the role of other international players to make pressure over these let's say authorities or regimes so as to respect the human security values or by applying international agreements so as to preserve such values in state performance. Now, and after the latest developments in the world that we are watching every day, especially Russian war in Ukraine and the consequences of such conflict that has international reflections on the level of the NATO states or the Western states against Russia and some other states that sorry, have different position toward this world. It again emphasized the need for reconciliation and for finding new approaches to deal with these escalating conflicts along the world. This has caused a dramatic change in the environment of international security after Cold War. I mean, the situation which has been preserved after Cold War is collapsing. And now world is going either in Europe or in the whole of the world to make new security arrangements and a new security vision that can prevent the drift toward international armed conflict. And this creates the necessity of finding new approaches to deal with the new security challenge threatening the nowadays world. So the post-Cold War policies of containment, democratization, wars of solidarity, all have a proven failure to achieve international stability. And this has been obvious by conflicts that has spread inside the state instead of international conflict or wars between states. And we know that during the 19th of the past century and the first two decades of the 20th century, that such internal conflict and civil wars erupted along the world in Middle East, in Africa, in Europe itself, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, as we know. So policy of containment, democratization, used by United States and backed by the West, have proven failure to achieve international stability. And now in a world where international conflict is inevitable due to the continuous conflict of interest, as we see, efforts must concentrate to de-escalate military conflicts, to emphasize the role of international organizations and non-state actors, because concentration has been all the time on the state as regarded as the main actor in international politics. And after the Cold War, it has proven that other international players or actors has proven their efficiency and role in international politics. Neglecting these factors can be a factor of wars or conflicts or a threat to stability along the world. Thinking of settling a new international order that recognize the role of non-state actors in international politics. And as well, reforming UN upon a new basis, upon democratic basis, and representation of non-state actors to legitimize their international role. And promoting non-military approaches to settle conflicts, like dialogue and negotiations. And enhancing the culture of tolerance against fascism and ethno-nationalism. This is the relation and mechanism between international security and reconciliation. In this part of the presentation, we will concentrate on reconciliation and the relationship between reconciliation and internal security. And here we are talking about security at the internal level, at the level of the state and its actors inside the state, like civil society, like other groups. And this is environment is very highly complex because of different factors. When it comes to internal security, here we are facing different types of internal threats: social, ethnic, sectarian, terrorism, crime, etc. The second factor of the complexity of internal security it matters international security. The winning between internal and external threats on all domains. Internal conflict cannot be separated from external conflicts and from the whole international relation system. And we noticed that different wars along the world and conflicts and civil wars were promoted from external states and from external powers who were keen to make these conflicts are more intense to achieve political objectives. As well, internal conflict is often connected with politics, even if the conflict is not merely political in its essence. It is used in state politics. And this is very common in all internal conflicts. And we know very well that escalation of internal conflict is devastating in terms of social cohesion and national integrity. It weakening the rule of law and justice. Internal conflicts, destroying state institutions, including security institutions and justice providers. It often brings social and demographic change due to possible internal displacement that often accompany civil wars, beside negative socio-economic impact on the community in question. So why reconciliation is important in conflict communities? First, because reconciliation restores social cohesion in societies damaged by conflict. There is no other way to achieve such cohesion without dialogue between conflicting parties. Either they are political parties or even if they are other sub-state powers or sub-state sectarian or religious groups or ethnicities, ethnic groups. As the state loses capacity to restore justice and rule of law, reconciliation and transitional justice become alternatives because the main security providers have become unable to restore rule of law and justice. So another mechanism for achieving rule of law must be applied, and as a result of dialogue or negotiations inside these groups, society can restore justice and social cohesion, as we have mentioned earlier. And in post-conflict situation, reconciliation supports local and national capacities to heal past wrongs. One of the main aspects of reconciliation and internal security is the connection between reconciliation and state rebuilding. And we know that after the end of civil war, or either when wars and conflict is ongoing, state rebuilding is very important. So reconciliation approaches is the only approaches can be used to help state rebuilding efforts, either by the state itself or by international community, because no state rebuilding can be done without the help and the enhancement of other international players and let's say those who fund these efforts as well. So if we notice, we know that reconciliation promotes DDR in post-conflict reforms. The first step taken, sorry, in post-conflict reform is DDR, and this abbreviation refers to a process of disarmament and deployment and reintegration of post-militias and military groups. So they agree through dialogue to put down their weapons and arms and to integrate in the society or in the formal security forces, army and police. DDR has been applied in all post-conflict situations, and it proves success in different cases, while in others, there's still problems in achieving such deployment and disarmament procedures. As well, internal dialogue helps formulating of a shared vision on security. white paper, for example. And here we refer to white paper as a document that is agreed by society and different political parties about defense policy, defines defense policy and security threats. It defines what security threats are. And this case has been applied in different post-conflict situations, like South Africa, which was, as seen, the successful or the most successful practicing of white paper policies. So white paper is a reflection of a democratic security. I mean, when security becomes the matter of whole society, not merely for conflicting parties or on the military domain or on security providers. As well, reconciliation creates national consensus over security policy inside and outside the state. I mean, after society becomes able to define what threats society faces and what security policy needed to be applied so as to achieve security objectives. So national consensus is very important because it ensures backing of society to the security policy and no division over such policy. As well, it promotes a transparent security and justice institutions. And if we notice that all efforts has to do with security sector reform, for example. It is based upon reconciliation prospects. For example, as we have mentioned, defining security policy as part of security sector reform, democratization. Sorry, because good practice in security sector reform assumes that security apparatus must perform in transparent and in an accountable way that secures and assures their ability to achieve security for all citizens and for all sectors of a given society. As well, security sector reform has to do with legal and with parliament reforms that ensure that each part of the society is represented in the parliament or in all institutions. As well, security sector reform promotes the role of civil society, and civil society must play important role in control over armed and security forces. So in this brief presentations, we try to highlight the relationship between security and reconciliation on both international and internal domains. So we leave other clarification for the questions from the participants. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Nizam, for this enlightenment about security and reconciliation and the relations between them and how they interact. And, you know, like one build. Can we say that security is dependent on reconciliation or interdependent on reconciliation? Have you thought of that? So like to have security is interdependent to have reconciliation. Have you thought of what does the relations of this can mean for you? What do you think?
I think it depends on the type of security that we maintain. For example, if we go to the security of that depends on for example, counterterrorism and achieving security by using force and by using military operations, perhaps not lead to such specific situation in the country. And we have examples from Iraq and from other states where security has been performed in this way. But if we go to other post-conflict situations, we see that security cannot be achieved without reconciliation, without working with the whole aspects of society. It is part of democratization, and it is part of state building. So in this way, yes, security is highly dependent on reconciliation and cannot be achieved without reconciliation approaches.
Thank you, Professor Nizam. I open also questions for other participants. If you have questions for Professor Nizam, I have actually more questions. If nobody wants to interfere, I'll have any question. I have another question. Socioeconomic impact. You wrote that security and reconciliation can develop a socioeconomic impact. On what way? How does it affect reconciliation as a social economic impact and insecurity? Maybe you can elaborate on this because you wrote it in your lecture.
Yes, thank you for this question, because if we go back to the reasons of conflict along the world, and we are talking now here either international conflicts or internal conflicts that are dependent or caused by socio-economic factors, the change in the social structures or in the economic relationships on the domain of the state, or even regional security because of economic factor. And let's take an example, two models of economy. Let's have an example of social economy or socialist economy and the free economy. And we can notice what structure of society, we can have on these two models of economy. So it is not separated. And what the threats can be defined to the state in the model of a free economy or liberal economy are different of threats that are oriented or threatening socialist state. Socialist state or central state has the ability to mobilize forces for war, but in liberal state, no, because in liberal states, or let's say in capitalist states, the other actors or economic powers are responsible for accountability and for asking why we go to the war. And this is known as the taxpayers, who are not existing on the socialist state. So wars become a matter of disputation between people, with civil society. And we know the American case in Vietnam and later in Iraq, that clear role in defining what war we are going, or is it a war of choice or war of no choice? So this is the relationship between socio-economic structure and wars in international sphere. While on national and internal domain, we know that the socio-economic structure is responsible for political change. And it's very important to notice that in non-democratic states, how conflict over internal resources happens, and what kind of conflict this can cause in the fragile states that are not able to impose security, or not able to have a shared vision over their security policy. So from this perspective, we can see a high connection between socio-economic structure and security and reconciliation as well. And when it comes, finally, when it comes to reconciliation initiatives cannot ignore such powers in society, like social powers that can work and that can affect the society to maintain rule of law and justice when the state apparatus is not available. And I think through Arab world, and we have during the Arab Spring and the absence of law, the role of social structures in preserving stability in some areas where state was not working. And we can notice this also in the Palestinian territories by the end of the second intifada, when Israel has paralyzed the role of security forces of the Palestinian police, was not able to act against crime or against disorder, how these powers, social powers, has played important role in maintaining security and in preventing further social conflict. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Nizam. I would like to ask, do you want us to have a break 5 minutes, and then we continue the debate for 1 hour? What do you think before or we just continue? Is that applicable that we take 5 minutes break and have a coffee or something and then come back and then we continue for 1 hour? Is that okay? For 45 minutes.
So I think we can agree if there are 10 hours, sorry, 10 minutes, not 5.
Okay, then 10 minutes,
10
okay.
10 minutes.
So yeah, I know we have sit for 1 hour, so 10 minutes, and then we come back. If Professor Nizam wants 10 minutes, okay, not 5. So we can have a coffee as well. I would like to have a coffee as well. So we have a coffee and we come back in 10 minutes.
Finding solutions or for reconciliation. With regard to Mr. Abdelrazak, I think we need to differentiate between security as a mean or security as an end by itself. I mean, conflicting parties sometimes regard security as an end. Sorry, so they use every mechanism to achieve what they think that their security needs. With regard to the Algerian-Moroccan case, I am not expert in the area, but I can see it working with the international relation mechanism itself, the state interest, I mean, and the conflicting between let's say state interests that can lead to such competition over gas and over other issues that has to do with their priorities in the region. But again, for security itself is not separated from the objectives of security, as security is not working only to achieve security, like musicians who play just to play music. No, I think security is like war. It has political ends. And without understanding the political ends of security, we cannot understand how security works and in what conditions we can reconcile between conflicting parties, either in an internal or international domains, because it is the same. So if we go to the conflicts, internal conflicts, civil wars that has sparked all over the world after the Cold War, the problem, or if you look to these conflicts, some of them has ethnic, let's say, or sectarian, or has to do with ideological conflict or political competition. But at the end, they all has to do with internal politics, with power, with sharing power for regime, for a political change. So they are not separated from each other. And we can understand that in some cases, reconciliation work, for example, and others no. If you go to Libya, for example, sometimes you find that reconciliation is on process, even there are problems. But the process never stopped, either one day. And it has all the time reflections of political ambitions, either inside Libya or the regional actors that are involved in Libya. You go to Turkey, to Gulf states, and then to the international reflections of this internal conflict. But it is a conflict over power and over sharing the power between the competing social and political rivals in Libya. But in other cases, reconciliation is not working if you go to Yemen, because situation there is different, has different aspects. Rivals are in Yemen are different because it's a kind of proxy war between Iran and Saudi Arabia. Even Saudi Arabia is engaged themselves and United Emirates in the war, but it is a proxy war because it has to do with its regional reflections rather than internal. So here we can look at the international will or the regional will between the real competing parties to achieve reconciliation between rival parties. And I think also it is applied to the situation in Palestine, the partition between Hamas and Fatah governments in Gaza and in Ramallah. And we find that also it is affected by the Israeli factor itself and by other regional extensions that looks to manage this conflict according to their interests in the region. So it is complicated, and it is connecting one to another, internal and external conflict. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Nizam. I would move to the chat a little bit because some people were writing in the chat. So we some students and professor. We have a question from Professor Abed Rabbo. Do you like Professor Abed Rabbo to I read the chat, or do you like to ask your question? Professor Abed Rabbo.
Ask my question, Dr. Iyad.
Okay, so Professor Abed Rabbo.
I have two questions.
Okay, you can ask then. You can. I give you the floor. You can ask.
I have a short question. In the Palestinian case, how to understand the role of international security in achieving Palestinian reconciliation? Don't you think that international actors have a negative role exactly between two movements, Fatah and Hamas?
Yes. First, I noticed a question about the concept of human security. I don't know if you like also to address this question about human security and its relationship with reconciliation. Before moving to the Palestinian case and the international reflections on the internal conflict on the Palestinian arena. But human security is very important concept to address or to highlight because people sometimes does not differentiate very well between human security and individual security. Individual security has to do with security of individuals within the state. But human security here is something cut across nationalism, religion, anything that can divide people and make people conflicting. So they are, at the end of the day, they are all humans and they deserve security. Because if we go to the national security problem or dilemma, we know very well in Palestine here, in the Palestinian case, and here we represent the Palestinian out of view of the thing, that when the security of an Israeli or a settlers means one positive, that means one negative for a Palestinian. I mean, the security for Israeli Jews is against the security of the Palestinians as different nationality. So this is not a reconciliation security. But if you go to apply human security here, I think all people in Palestine, Israel, deserve security from human security outstand, not security for a part of the population or for a special or a specific nationality, while the other nationality is threatened because of the efforts to provide security for the other nationality. And this can be applied for other conflicts as we see along the world. And to go back to the international factor and its relationship or its connection with the internal Palestinian conflict between Fatah and Islamic parties that are backed from Iran in a military way and from other regional powers in terms of political, let's say, backing or support. And here again, we think that reconciliation or Palestinian moribund, let's say, moribund reconciliation process is affected by the regional will of these conflicting parties in Palestine. And whether these circumstances or regional circumstances can approve or promote Palestinian reconciliation. Yes, I think this is a very important point. And I don't think that reconciliation is possible without dialogue between these regional players who are involved in directly with this conflict. But in order to be more fair, I think Palestinians themselves need to promote their approaches and their understanding to what they think about Palestinian interest, national interest, how to formulate this, how to formulate a shared vision about about security. And this is the main difference between division and democracy. You know, we know very well that democracy is about difference in everything. And difference is very important for democracy, but not on security. Security, as always, is a matter of national consensus, even in democratic states. Also, the intrinsic things that has to do with the national feat is not a matter of reconciliation. They must be upon national consensus, the flag of the state, the history. I think these things are very important, and must Palestinians reach a consensus first over these things before going to reconcile other matters that they are competing or that they have problems about. I hope that I have answered your question.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nizam. So we go to Professor Mkhemar. You can ask a question.
Thank you, Dr. Iyad. First of all, I want to thank Dr. Nizam for a very informative lecture. I have to admit that I have learned a lot from his lecture and his speech and discussion about human security, security and reconciliation. As you all know that we are all learning here from these different viewpoints. I don't really have a question. I have a comment to make with regard to what has been said by Dr. Nizam, and also but by what you said at the beginning of the questions, Dr. Iyad, with regard to security and reconciliation, whether one is dependent on the other or it's an interdependent issue here. I think again, I'm not an expert on this subject. As I mentioned, I'm just making my view on the basis of what I have seen from different experiences, whether it's in Palestine, Palestinian-Israeli conflict, or other cases. I think one note to make here is that it seems to me that reconciliation will probably be hard to achieve without law and order, without security. So there has to be some kind of security. There has to be some kind of law and order in order to move forward with reconciliation. But I think it sounds much more stronger to support, to argue, or to say that security reconciliation leads to security. But it depends on what kind of reconciliation are we talking about. I think if we are talking about reconciliation as a zero-sum game, one wins and one loses, I don't think that reconciliation in such a case will lead to security, because we have seen cases maybe all over the world with regard to post-conflict countries that reconciliation hasn't succeeded as an optimal thing, because it seems to me, which has to do with the issue that maybe some regimes are hesitant to move forward with reconciliation, because sometimes regimes or governments look toward reconciliation as a zero-sum game, that they want reconciliation to be for the benefit of the regime, that reconciliation means the stability and the continuation of the regime. So I think if reconciliation is a zero-sum game, that one wins and one loses, we are not talking about security. That security is still far away. But if reconciliation is not a zero-sum game, it's a win-win situation for both parties, definitely, in my opinion, that will lead to security and stability. And thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Mkhemar, for this enlightening comment. I can tell you that I feel that reconciliation is not a win zero-sum game. It cannot be if our approach for reconciliation as a process. So if you do good to me, I do good to you. But if you do bad to me, then I stop doing good to you. So it cannot become a zero-sum game. I think it's not a reconciliation. When it is a zero-sum game, there's no reconciling at any point. Reconciliation cannot be that someone wins and the other is losing. So that's it's about restoring justice, I guess. And as you know, we are debating reconciliation. So as well, there's nobody knows what is right or wrong in reconciliation. And every country or every conflict has its own reconciliation aspect. Like we cannot take the reconciliation of South Africa, for example, and say we can apply the South African reconciliation to any kind of conflict, because the two entities can create their own reconciliation process. They have to create it. They have to get out from the dilemma of the conflict. This is where conflict transformation happens. So what we want to do is like what I think, that conflict transformation is happening either to good or to bad, always, because we are, as human beings, we are changing, and we're changing, and it depends where you want to take that change. And I think we can take that change to reconciliation if we work towards the reconciliation process. But it cannot be by one person dictating the other and the other dictating the other. It's I think two have to accept what they are doing to develop their own the best outcome for both. So when it comes to security, I think we can say that reconciliation is interdependent with security, because security can develop reconciliation, a respect for the other, respect for the other narrative of the other, of the past, maybe. So there's like, security can play a very big role in reconciliation process. So what we can do, like we are doing here is like understanding what is reconciliation. We can put our own definition for reconciliation. You don't need to follow other people like the Korean. Now I can give you an example. North and South Korea, they started reconciliation in 2010. You know, we never heard about it. They've been like 10 years working on the reconciliation process, both of them. And we never heard, I heard about it last year or 2-3 years ago when I was supervising master students who's writing about the North and South Korean reconciliation process. So it's about two entities and how they will build their own reconciliation process. So I don't think that makes it as a process, and it's very hard to have a zero-sum game in it. So that's I wanted to elaborate about it. So I think, and even win-win, it's like, it's not win-win. It's like what is best for you and is best for me at the same time. Maybe win-win can happen with it, but it's very difficult to get a win-win situation, always. The only thing good about reconciliation is that it changes better than what you are living right now. So if you take the Irish example, the Ireland example, they still hate each other, the North and the South. They still don't like each other. They still carry different passports. They still carry everything. But I asked them, do you want to go back to what you were before reconciliation? The answer will be no. Because reconciliation is what better for you than what is right now. So right now you have a situation that is a conflict. And developing reconciliation will make the conflict transform into a betterness for both people. At a stage, both people would not want to go back, even that the reconciliation is not that good enough. So reconciliation is not ideal, but it is a process for the betterness of both. So this is what I want to elaborate. And thank you so much, Professor Mkhaima, for this.
Dr. Iyad, can I just make a very short comment, please?
Yeah.
Allow me.
Yeah.
Now, I totally agree with you, and I totally understand what you are saying. But let me just make this very quick. Now, to me, reconciliation, it's a process. It's a process of restoring normal relations. It's a process of restoring a friendship. Now, when I spoke about reconciliation, that it has, in order for reconciliation to succeed and to achieve security, it has to be a win-win situation for both parties. And I was very much influenced or very much under the effect of Palestinian proposed reconciliation. For the past 15 years, many countries and Palestinians themselves have tried to reach some kind of reconciliation between the two competing parties or the two factions, Fatah and Hamas. And I think part of the reason why reconciliation has not succeeded, or why Palestinian internal reconciliation has not succeeded, because it has been viewed by both Hamas and Fatah as a zero-sum game. If you look at the history of the so-called Palestinian reconciliation process for the past 15 years, sometimes Fatah was interested in reconciliation because the region was in favor of Fatah. There were instances when Hamas was interested in reconciliation when the region was so favorable toward political Islam and Islamist groups. And that's why I said that sometimes the competing parties or the fighting parties look toward reconciliation as a zero-sum game. One wins and one loses. And as I mentioned, in my opinion, that's not going to lead to reconciliation or security, because always there will be some, even with the issue that you just mentioned about North and South Ireland. I mean, the issue of Northern Ireland and Ireland, that yes, maybe they do not want to go back. They don't want to go back to the situation that existed before the Good Friday Agreement, where there were violence and a lot of conflict. But in the meantime, reconciliation, as I mentioned to you, as I understand it, it's the restoration of good relations. It's the restoration of friendship, and whether we can achieve that or not, I guess it's very hard. But I think we always have to think in how the parties, whether it's internal conflict or cross-national conflict between two different states, like now Russia and Ukraine, or Palestine and Israel, or Northern Ireland and Britain. So that's what I meant. And thank you. I'm gonna leave it up here.
Thank you very much for this comment. We appreciate it. And we don't have a real, nobody has real what is the mechanism of reconciliation in any conflict. It's like every two entities that are in conflict, they create their own reconciliation conflict. We try to get some practices, how to practice, what are the tools of reconciliation, but it might not be effective in that conflict. You might create your own tool of reconciliation at the end between the two parties. And this is how it evolved. And I think, for me personally, I think reconciliation is a process. And I think it's good that you enlightened that it's to restore friendship and restore relations. I think it's good. It's a very hard thing to restore friendship and relations. So I thought we will never restore friendship and relations, but we will live good together. This is what I see happen to North Ireland and Britain. They live together, but they're not friends. They didn't restore friendship until today. But reconciliation was 50% affected, and they don't want to go back, even that they still today hate each other. So this is, I thank you so much. I like your comment about restoring friendship and relations. I think it's an excellent thing. And this is exactly what reconciliation wants to happen, but usually it doesn't. But that maybe does not mean that reconciliation failed. It means that it did not approach that level of reconciliation, but it approached a level of a better common future. So we are building and we plant seeds. So we want a better seed. And that's where reconciliation starts. So I think it's an excellent comment by you, Professor, I think, as well. So we can have, I think, who hasn't, yeah?
Dr. Iyad, thank you so much again for giving me the opportunity to explain more what I meant by my first comment. So if we try to think of, let's say, the security and reconciliation very deeply and critically, we may find that they have in common some principles. They have in common some interests and objectives. Both of them, let's say, are seeking peacemaking in some context, peacemaking, okay? And that make them, let's say, the people or the person can use them as synonymous or interchangeably. And this is a problem, because it is okay, it is applicable in some context, but it's different in another context. That's why we need to understand which is which. We need to make, let's say, a clear cut between the two, since they are not synonymous, they are not the same. We cannot use the same mechanisms in bringing peace if our concern is peacemaking. For example, and that's what I meant by if we use, for example, the mechanism of security in reconciliation context, we may fail because it is, as you explained, that we cannot guarantee that we can, let's say, succeed in bringing the reconciliation, bringing peace to the people, and bringing the normal relationship to the people. Yeah, it is okay. It's a process, but sometimes we can fail in using security mechanism or approach in the reconciliation context. And that's why I gave the example of Algerian, because Algerian Moroccan conflict is different from Palestinian Israeli conflict. It's different from some conflicts elsewhere, because in our context, I mean, Moroccan Algerian, it's not reconciliation. It's not about reconciliation, but it's about security. Every state, every system is not secure. And that's why it's let's say, export their crisis to the outside. I mean, either Morocco or vice versa. If we apply reconciliation, and that's why I explain, let's the Moroccan and Algerian system, let's say, it rarely come to meet each other and to the preparatory stages that reconciliation practitioner believe in. So they refused. And I give you the example of the last conflict. No one accept to listen to each other. No one accept to meet each other, to talk, and so on. So that's the question. The question is that how, for example, a peace practitioner could make the clear cut. This is a context. This is a reconciliation context, and they need to use reconciliation mechanism. And this is security context, and they need to use, for example, security mechanism. Thank you so much again.
Thank you, Abdulrazak. Thank you. Dr. Nizam, maybe you can comment on Abdulrazak's comment. He said sometimes security makes reconciliation fail, and you have to make a real cut between what is reconciliation and what is security. And what do you think? I think, for my personal view, is it's that I think we can see some interdependencies between reconciliation and security. But I want to give you the floor, Professor Nizam, to answer about that, since you are the
thank you, and I'm sorry for Abdulrazak if I am not clear about differentiating between these two concepts. But we can take it another way. I mean, reconciliation can be understood in connection with conflict itself. I mean, if there are no conflicts, there are no need for reconciliation. And I'm not sure if from the literature, the wider literature of conflict resolution and conflict transformation, we can recall a few rules. The first rule says that there is no conflict without resolution. I mean, there is no conflict forever. And as well, the peace itself is not an eternal thing. I mean, people, states always conflict for different reasons. And their conflict has also different aspects, let's say. But with the Algerian case itself, with the Algerian-Moroccan case, I know that relationship between these two Arab states are complicated before the latest crisis, and it has to do with differences, even between political systems, between history, and social structure as well, socio-economic structure as well. It is a kind of competency, but I am not sure that this kind of competency and conflict can escalate to a war. Perhaps it's not easy to guess it this way, or to put an assumption this way. So it is a conflict, and this conflict needs to be settled, I think, due to the principle of national will itself. I mean, the national will and the national interest. What kind of resolution can be found between, or what the need for a reconciliation between the two countries, the two neighbors, and I think this is important to think about. So I know for Algerian part, for example, which what kind of politics they produce against to the Algerian heritage itself as a post-colonial state, and the kind of political culture, and here we know what we mean by political culture. It's not political culture is the relation between people and the regime. How people understand the difference between the government or the regime and the state. I think these questions are very important to understand if people agree or disagree with political decisions. And this is applied, for example, also by with the ongoing war between Russia and Ukraine, because okay, we have a similar cultural platform between two countries, but also we have different political culture that produce different political decisions and or approaches to end the conflict itself. So I think this needs deep studying on the aspects or on the levels that politics works and reflect itself in the region. If you allow me, Professor Iyad, I will go back to Professor Mokhemar's contribution about the zero-sum game thing, and I totally also agree with him. It's very important to understand that national security, and this is not applied merely to the Israeli-Palestinian case, sorry, but national security is connected with international relations and with the realistic view or the realism, let's say, that held the state that is the main factor in international politics. And the international system is chaotic one. I mean, and it can be organized through power itself. So there is no need for reconciliation in this way. Because as I said, during the Cold War, it has been regarded that the balanced power between United States and Soviet Union was very important to achieve stability. And if we go to that period, to the Cold War, we will see less conflict than there was after the Cold War, after the collapse of the Soviet Union. So it was the balance of power, the power itself, the military power itself that makes war also it result to not peace, of course, but a stability. And it is a zero-sum game equation. But no longer people should adhere to that. If we apply this on the internal Palestinian conflict, I think that, yes, there is zero-sum game thinking between rivals, but also it is not the fate of the reconciliation process to work on this mechanism, because sometimes we understand that Israel, for example, can make some policies that can change the route of the Palestinian reconciliation. So we don't have the ownership. I mean, we don't have, as a Palestinians, either in Gaza, either in West Bank, we don't have the ownership over the reconciliation process. And this thing is different from other cases that nation or the given society may acquire these local ownership, let's say, local ownership that allows you to develop your future view to the security. And this is a very important thing to consider when we study the internal Palestinian conflict. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Nizam. I think we have only 5 minutes, but if any other questions, I think Shahira asked a question before here. While we see the security is absent in the area of Palestine, Israel, the West Bank, and Gaza, how reconciliation promotes the security of all participants, to individuals and to the state, Palestinian Authority or Israel? Do you think that reconciliation process is possible at all? Is this question for Professor Nizam or our group, I guess? I don't know. What do you think, Professor Nizam? Do you like to debate on this?
Well, yes, I think that when it comes to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, I mean, it is not a national conflict in itself. It's more complicated because from the Palestinian side, I'm talking all the time as a Palestinian, we see it as an apartheid system, and it has to do with racism, is not with national struggle. For example, I can assure, I hear music, I don't know if it's kind of, well, if we go, I can use a simple example on this, that more than 70% of Jewish Israelis, they don't like to hear Arab music, Arab dialogue, even to hear it, you know. So I think without breaking down, as well as happened in South Africa, for the racist system in Israel, reconciliation cannot be, and here we are talking about reconciliation, not negotiations, not peace negotiations. I'm not talking about peace negotiations that started in 1992. I'm talking about reconciliation in general. I mean, in the sense that Dr. Iyad has mentioned already, that when both Israelis and Palestinians have a common understanding that they must not be wars, that everybody can continue to hate the other, can continue to don't understand the other, not to admit the other as another, but not to transform this into conflict. I'm not sure if I have an answer of this, or if it is possible or not, if it is applied or not to this conflict in these circumstances. Today, tomorrow, after 10 years, after 20 years, perhaps we can ask this question. But I think in the intense and complicated situation of the Israeli-Palestinian reality, different layers, the conflict has different layers. It's not only conflict over land. It's, I think problem has to do with the coexistence between both, if possible or not. And I think we all have watched the recent developments in Jerusalem. And we have noticed that the issue of coexistence itself is under question in a mixed city like Jerusalem. So what do you think about the other apartheid system of settlements, of blockading Gaza Strip also? I mean, imposing a reality of to deal with the Palestinians, and we can't we can't separate this apartheid system and apply it only to the Palestinians in Jerusalem or West Bank. In Gaza as well, they are subject to apartheid system, and we need to remember that every newborn in Gaza has a series ID number like any other Jewish in Tel Aviv or in Khudera or everywhere. So all Palestinians are under Israeli control, are under this apartheid system control in different ways. In Gaza, they have their way to control. In West Bank, they have their own way. In East Jerusalem, they have different rules to, and I think Dr. Iyad is familiar with this, with the case of East Jerusalem. And even in inside Palestinian communities in inside the green line. And here also we need to understand what kind of, or how we understand citizenship in Israel. What does it mean? Is it holding the Israeli ID, or perhaps it is not? And I think it is not. I think citizenship in Israel, I think, is connected of being part of Israeli army. This is the real citizenship in Israel. So if this we look at this racist part of the conflict, I think here is the main problem for reconciliation, more than the nationalist part of this conflict. Because at the national part, I think we can find things in common. We now know what Israelis can accept or not, as well as Israelis. They know what Palestinians can accept or not. Perhaps it's more easier than the coexistence between Jewish Israelis and Palestinians within the land of mandatory Palestine.
Thank you, Dr. Nizam. I think Professor Omar has a question, but I would like to check about when security involves, maybe Dr. Omar, do you like to speak and ask Professor Nizam the last question? We'll give it to you. Professor Omar, are you with us? Or do you want me to ask a question? So I'll ask for him, for Professor Omar. He asked about how can you have internal security when other impacts of international relations are impacting the situation of the conflict?
This is very critical question about the relationship between internal and external security. And actually they are not separated. They are not separated because reflections continues. But I think as far as internal parts inside a given community can have similar interests, and I think that they can have agree on a power share bargain. I think the external factor becomes weakening more than when things between conflicting parties over rule and over perhaps economic, and here we are generally speaking, not we are talking about specific context, as we mentioned, and in a specific context, international reflection is stronger than other contexts. It has to do with the relationship, the interrelationship between different social powers and structures, whether it is sectarian, for example, sectarian conflict, is it political, is it ethnic conflict? So it's very important to understand here what kind of conflict we have. Then we can understand its relationship with the outside sphere, and either it is regional or international. But yes, there is no guarantee that that internal conflict can be solved without international reconciliation and international will to sponsorship reconciliation process. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Nizam, for this enlightenment and comments and our brainstorming about security and reconciliation. I would like to welcome also Professor Ahmed Salaimi from University of Jordan. He is with us, even that he is in Croatia now. But you're welcome, Professor Ahmed Salaimi. I don't know if you
Yes,
can.
thank you, Dr. Iyad. Yeah, I am very glad to join you and the other colleagues today. So I noticed that you have the seminar, and I can join it partially. Especially that next month also we'll host the Armenia project meeting in Amman, Jordan. So we are looking forward to meeting you all. And yeah, so I am listening to the discussions, and yeah, so thanks again for giving me this opportunity. And if I have anything where I can interfere and ask, so thank you.
Thank you, Professor Ahmed. We just wanted to enlighten that we are having the workshop in Jordan from 4 June until 11 June for between our Erasmus Armenia project. So
Yeah,
this is
yeah, this is for the projects. Yeah, it is restricted for the Erasmus plus projects, but the good thing is that Dr. Iyad, that we would arrange also some discussions and meeting with the schools of international studies that we have at the University of Jordan. This is very well-known schools with the like distinguished programs with reconciliations and other international studies. And during your visits with the Erasmus Plus projects partners of Armenia, that you will have the opportunity to meet the colleagues there and to discuss also different aspects of cooperation that we at the University of Jordan would have with Armenia as a body, and specifically with Armenia projects.
Thank you, Professor Ahmed. Thank you, and we are delighted to have you here actually in this session. We are now nearly ending the session, but we have another announcement that the second session will be with the University of Innsbruck and two professors from the Unit of Peace, and they will present in our Armenia project here in next week. So I hope that everyone will be attending, and we will show them, because they are still new. They are replacing Professor Dr. Dietrich, who was replaced by the University of Innsbruck and not by us. Some of our Algerian colleagues thought that we replace people as we like, but which is not the case. Never mind, but I would like to tell you, yes?
I agree with you that usually I think that the university is like nominating the team and the participant, and this is, I think, that the right of each university and institute to select its team. Therefore, even that from us at the University of Jordan, sometimes you will see that we'll have like maybe some names that they were added to the projects, for example, for the Erasmus Plus project, because the president and vice president found that those colleagues who are like have some background in this field, and their participation in the projects will be like more useful for the projects, they decided to add them. So at the end, the decision would be for the presidents, the rector at each institute to nominate the suitable team to work with the project.
That's excellent, Professor. Maybe they can attend the next week as well, because we need a good impression for the Innsbruck folks, and to show them what we are. They have a master program in peace studies at the University of Innsbruck in Austria, and they are willing to share their experience and how they worked it out, and they are really want to give a lecture about the work of peace studies in the region. So thank you, Professor Ahmed, for being with us and enlightening us of what is happening. And this is good, actually. So now we have a very good team, and we are ready to, to engage. So we hope to see you as well in the next week as well in the lecture, knowledge exchange workshop we call it. And yeah, I think for now we have nearly ending our session, and I thank everyone who attended here, from the PhD students of Armenia and for the professors from the Armenia as well. I would like also to tell you that Armenia won an award from the Trends Research in Dubai, and the award was given to Armina. It's for our work for developing reconciliation and peace education in the Middle East and North Africa. And they have recognized us as a research institute here on this
So
topic.
congratulations, Dr. Iyad.
Well, thank you so much. It's congratulations for all of us. Armina without us all will not be Armina. So we are Armina. So this present an award, I took it in the name of Armina. So I just want to share it with you actually. Thank you so much everyone, and have a good, pleasant and good Friday. Cheers. Bye-bye. Bye.